they had this idealized image of this father as being this saint-like person, this Santa Claus Messiah, you know.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the documentaries that tackle dark topics in the most unsettling of ways. For this list, we're excluding any docuseries, and spoilers will be mentioned.
The members of the church that were responsible for keeping those records threw up a lot of roadblocks in having to contact their attorneys to find out what they had to give to us.
Number 30, Killer Legends.
They had a lot of speculations on who did it, but it was never, no one was ever brought.
Telling scary stories is a formative experience for many, but the roots of some of the most iconic ones have often been ignored. Killer Legends sets out to fix that by taking 4 of the most well-known urban legends and delving into their history.
Some schools stop celebrating Halloween. They stop using the word Halloween, and they start talking about having a fall festival. New Jersey passed a law specifying penalties for people who were caught contaminating Halloween trees.
From the Candyman to evil clowns, each villain is analyzed, with some of the most wicked having connections to serial killers like John Wayne Gacy. It perfectly hits the balance between creepy and informative, and makes viewers realize just how much overlap there is between reality and horrific fiction. After watching this, it'll be practically impossible to hear a haunted tale without wondering what real-life monster served as the inspiration.
Everybody knows that people are afraid of clowns. Everybody knows that something's up with clowns. And the last couple of decades have just been confirmation of everything they ever feared.
Number 29, The Blackout Experiments.
I started to have some second thoughts about whether or not I should do this. I signed my life away going to this place.
Despite it going against so many of our natural instincts, there are still people that will intentionally put themselves through the most extreme or terrifying circumstances. So what exactly drives them to do this? The Blackout Experiments dives into this phenomenon by interviewing those who had taken part in an uncomfortably immersive haunted house experience.
You know, we all live once, and I guess we all want to do something that's risk-taking or scary.
Although they're put through extremely intense scares, ranging from being partially stripped to being put through various methods of torture, they still come back for more. As the sessions continue to ramp up, the audience is left wondering when it will all go too far. It is a fascinating look at how far some will go to push themselves, even when there's no reward for doing so.
It felt like S&M.
Upon receipt of this email, fill out the questionnaire below and send it back today.
I see a camera on and it's watching me.
Number 28, Grizzly Man.
I'm out in the prime cut of the Big Green. Behind me is Ed and Rowdy, members of an up-and-coming sub-adult gang. They're challenging everything, including me. Goes with the territory. If I show weakness, if I retreat, I may be hurt, I may be killed. I must hold my own if I'm going to stay within this land.
This demonstrates that nature isn't as docile as it's portrayed in Disney movies. Following the final years of Timothy Treadwell's life, Grizzly Man is the ultimate cautionary tale. It documents his steadily increasing delusions of befriending bears and how this leads to his horrific fate.
It's July 26th, and I've been dropped off all alone again here in the Grizzly Maze. And it's always such a surreal feeling as the plane takes off, and it doesn't quite sink into you, but just how alone you are. That for the next 2 months or more, you will be alone in this wild wilderness, this jungle that the bears have carved tunnels through.
It's made even more hard-hitting with clips and recordings made by Treadwell himself, including one that captures every grisly second of his and his girlfriend's deaths. The audio was reportedly so horrific that the director omitted it, meaning it was left to the viewers' imaginations to fill in the blanks themselves. It is a harsh reminder on the mindless brutality of nature, and how love for a wild animal will always lose to its base instincts.
Truly, you must never listen to this.
I know, Werner. I'm never going to.
And you must never look at the photos that I've seen at the coroner's office.
I will never look at them.
Yeah.
They said it was bad.
Number 27, Beware the Slender Man.
One thing about Morgan that always struck us as a little odd was that she didn't react the way that you would expect her to react like at the movies.
The internet has allowed even the creepiest creations to become widespread phenomena, for better or for worse. When Slender Man first took the web by storm, no one could have ever guessed it would culminate in a brutal murder attempt. The documentary about the case delves into the teenage suspects' mentalities, such as their belief in the boogeyman and their insistence that the stabbing was at his bequest.
If you're a proxy, supposedly you live in Slender Mansion that all the creepypastas supposedly live in, and it's supposedly in the middle of Nicollet National Park. I wanted to prove all skeptics wrong.
Despite physical proof of their obsession, such as chilling drawings, their parents were still left in the dark up until the stabbing took place, showing how easily concerning behavior can slip under the radar. As if the crime itself wasn't enough, it's accompanied by unsettling animations and visuals that would frighten even the bravest souls.
It's hard with kids because they don't necessarily know how to differentiate between fantasy and reality to begin with. So it's just hard to know, where to draw the line. Where does that become abnormal?
Number 26, Jonestown, the life and death of People's Temple.
Jim was not celibate. Nobody knew that until perhaps it was their time to find out. What he spoke from the pulpit wasn't what he did behind the scenes.
Although the fates of Jim Jones and those he led were heavily covered by the media at the time, the full extent of his abuse wasn't really known by the general public. In 2006, the public was given fresh insight from surviving members themselves. The movie covered the cult's history, from indoctrination to death. In between stories of his unfettered perversion were clips of his speeches, wherein he pitted his followers against the rest of society.
We had a lady who visited us a week ago here and was speaking to one at the door, and she was a member of a prominent church, a pastor's wife. And she said, I think that the poor should be made to control how many children they bring into the earth. You remember? Some leading scientists say we have to have euthanasia. Oh, no.
Each lurid detail reveals more of Jones's twisted intentions and acts, all leading to the mass death event orchestrated by him. While undoubtedly gripping, it's hard not to watch without realizing just how easy it is to fall victim to manipulation disguised as charm.
I look at our babies and I think they deserve to live. I agree. But also they deserve what's more, they deserve peace. We all came here for peace. Is it too late for us to...
She's calling Jim Jones on some of the things that he has promised them that they were going to do.
Number 25, A Certain Kind of Death.
According to the hotel manager, the decedent checked into the hotel on 7/13 at 11:30 hours and paid cash for one night. On 7/14, the manager checked on the welfare of the decedent because he did not vacate the room at checkout time. He knocked on the door at 1100 hours and heard the shower water running.
In the modern age, practically everything is turned into an industry, even death itself, covering every step of the process from the moment a body is found to the moment it's disposed of. A Certain Kind of Death is a raw look at what occurs after someone passes away. The film pulls no punches whatsoever, showing everything from recently deceased corpses in all their glory to smoldering bones.
I can just imagine if we do find a relative, the response is going to be probably non-emotional. There's, oh, okay. Well, we always wondered what happened to them.
The macabre imagery is coupled with the morticians' seemingly detached emotions from their work, proving that one can become numb to even the most upsetting things. The result is an undoubtedly fascinating yet dark look into a process that everyone will eventually go through, even though they won't be aware of it.
Looking through Mr. Tanner's things, he may have had a pre-need. And here's the actual pictures with his name written on his plot, which I've never seen that type of an organized situation. So he had buried his partner in a plot that he originally owned.
Number 24, Tickled.
One of the reasons that it's hard for us to go on camera or to take part in a documentary is that First of all, we don't think it would be very good for the company that we work for, because it seems like the spin, we have no control over what the spin would be.
The internet is full of strange rabbit holes that are often tempting to dive down. However, in doing so, you may come across something you can never unsee. The director of Tickled experienced this firsthand after stumbling across a video depicting competitive endurance tickling, and immediately knew he had to know more.
I wake up every morning to a message from Jane and Brian Media, who you guys work for, with a list of various personal attacks and also legal threats. That's been happening daily.
You started this fight, I didn't. You were the ones that decided this is what you were going to do.
The film covers his descent into the phenomenon, all while being insulted and threatened by the company distributing tickling videos. Things only become more twisted as victims remarked on the financial abuse and blackmail they underwent by the perpetrator. After seeing this, it'll be near impossible to see a piece of odd content without wondering about the person on the other end or their true intentions for making it.
You're not welcome here.
We're not welcome here?
And I'm calling the police. Bye. Out.
All right, we'll head off. You don't want to do any final chats or anything? Last opportunity?
Number 23, The Nightmare.
Last ditch effort of everything I had, I just wrenched my body. As soon as I flipped over on top of her, I woke up. And I was still laying in my original position, none of it had happened. And it was just completely shocked. I had no idea what was going on. And I just did not know what to make of it.
While we may think bad dreams are only confined to our minds, there are ways they can manifest in the real world. Sleep paralysis, a temporary condition wherein one's brain wakes up but their body remains frozen, is the center of the nightmare. Sufferers recount their experiences with the state, including visual and auditory hallucinations and even feeling as though they were being touched.
The person on the other end was this very pleasant man. He was like, "Hello, I was wondering if you could do me a favor."
What kind of favor?
Let me in. As if that isn't off-putting enough, they then recreate each person's tale with visual representations of the supposed demons bothering them. They also delve into how other cultures see the phenomenon as proof of demonic possession and the ancient rituals they use to expel them. It shows how our minds will find ways to work against us, even while unconscious.
There was never an explanation for the shadow man except for hypnagogic hallucinations, which is a nice word that the doctors like to throw around, but it really means you just imagined it.
My guess is we conceptualize things in our unconscious based on, snippets of information that we picked up along the road somehow.
Number 22, Girl in the Picture.
When I first learned that Tanya was actually killed by a hit-and-run driver, it was more than likely Franklin Floyd that had committed that. I mean, this guy was going to be violent. Catching him might be tricky.
Even the worst crimes can go on completely unnoticed for decades. No case exemplifies that more than the kidnapping and eventual murder of a girl known only in life by her fake name, Sharon Marshall. Her tragic story lives on in Girl in the Picture, which details every aspect of her horrific torment leading up to her death, and the search to find her true identity.
In the 1990s, again, he attacked a woman, so we begin to see the pattern of violence and abuse. But going through Floyd's past, it was obvious that something was off.
While the details of her upbringing, including being forced to marry the man who abducted and raised her, were horrid enough on their own, what makes it even scarier is how it went unnoticed until her mysterious death. It is unfortunate proof of how we truly never know what's going on behind closed doors, often until it's too late.
When we examined the skull, we found 2 bullet holes to the back of the skull, and the orbital bone was broken under one of the eyes. It was definitely not a natural death. There was definitely homicidal violence involved in it. So yes, it was classified as a homicide almost immediately. We looked at all of the local agencies. We weren't able to identify the skeleton.
Number 21, Deliver Us from Evil.
I mean, he took me out of the house. I said, sometimes I get car sick on the road. He said, put your head on my lap, and boom, the abuse started. I mean, I was on Highway 12, 2 minutes away from my house, and it started. And for 96 hours, that abuse was happening until my parents came and said, did you have fun with Father? And I'm like, He tickled me too much.
The Catholic Church has had a hand in covering up numerous underage abuse cases. This documentary dives into one case in particular, and how the internal protection of a predator had a ripple effect across several lives. It's centered around a Californian priest responsible for the assault of over 24 young victims during his tenure.
Here's somebody that I like. Here's somebody that I respect, whose family I respect. What will he feel like at the end of this? Yet at the other side, there was urges within me to be sexual with him.
Between haunting letters he sent detailing his horrific acts to testimonies revealing his vile manipulation tactics, it's hard not to watch without feeling extreme disgust. It was even revealed that other officials were aware of his crimes for years and took measures to shield him from the law, implying that they silently allowed the mistreatment to continue.
Are you at all concerned, Oliver, that if you give testimony that hurts the diocese, that they might revoke that?
I have a lot of concerns about a lot of things, and I guess that would be one of them.
Number 20, Mommy, Dead, and Dearest. Released by HBO, Mommy, Dead, and Dearest chronicles the events that led to Dee Dee Blanchard's death.
The truth is, okay, I'll admit it. I did actually stab her. I will admit it.
It details how she committed factitious disorder imposed on another, or what was once known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy, on her daughter, Gypsy Rose. Blanchard essentially made it seem like her daughter suffered from a number of terrible ailments. While upholding the lie, the mother put her child through unnecessary surgeries and other terrible things. Gypsy Rose then conspired with her boyfriend, Nicholas Godejean, to kill Blanchard. It's unsettling to think of the horrors that pushed a daughter to slay her own mother. No matter how you view it, Mommy, Dead, and Dearest makes for one creepy viewing experience.
I take blame on myself and I blame other people, but I never once blame y'all.
Number 19, Tabloid. Back in September of 1977, Mormon missionary Kirk Anderson was supposedly abducted and abused by a woman named Joyce McKinney. The story became known as the Manacled Mormon case.
She said to him she was going to go on having sex with him until she found she missed a period and would then hopefully be pregnant by him.
This terrifying story was extensively covered in the British tabloids, specifically the warring rivals Daily Express and Daily Mirror. The documentary Tabloid conveys these events with unnerving detail and is even narrated by Joyce McKinney herself. That shocking choice immediately brings viewers closer to the case than they expected. As a result, those watching will further question the story that she weaves because it has multiple viewpoints and perspectives.
I made everything that he wanted. I was like his little, wifey almost.
Number 18, There's Something Wrong with Aunt Diane. This troubling documentary tells the story of the 2009 Taconic State Parkway crash, a nasty traffic collision that resulted in 8 deaths.
It was a horrific scene on the Taconic Parkway near Route 117 this afternoon. This burned out shell was all that remained of a minivan after the head-on crash which left 8 people dead.
It was caused by a woman named Diane Schuler, the titular Aunt Diane. On that fateful day, she was the one traveling on the parkway in the wrong direction. It's a very disconcerting story that is rooted in unimaginable tragedy. Throughout the documentary, upsetting questions are raised about Schuler's state of mind. Between footage of the accident, interviews with grieving individuals, and some rather uncomfortable topics, There's Something Wrong with Aunt Diane puts forth a very uneasy atmosphere.
I feel like someone's gonna say, 10 years later, it proves what happened. There's so much more to the story.
Number 17, Team Foxcatcher. The story of John DuPont was famously captured in the 2014 film Foxcatcher, which earned 5 Oscar nominations.
You have a problem with me?
John, don't, John. John, I don't have a problem. Hey, John.
Team Foxcatcher was released 2 years later and serves as an eerie companion piece, retelling the story with a more grounded and arguably more disturbing angle. This Netflix documentary uses harrowing archival footage to tell its story. Viewers are also given a rather personal and alarming glimpse into the mind of a killer. By incorporating all these details, viewers get a sense of what led to DuPont's horrifying actions. The documentary explores how mental illness, wealth, and power can create a nightmarish situation.
Dave Schultz was the truest friend John had.
Kill them all!
Number 16, Capturing the Fredmans.
Well, this is private, so if you're not me, then you really shouldn't be watching this, because this is supposed to be a private situation between me and me. It's between me now and me in the future. So turn it off. Don't watch this. This is private.
What started as a short film about birthday party entertainers devolved into something much, much darker. Capturing the Fredmans delves into the activities of a disturbed man and his son, whose crimes are thought to range from possession of abhorrent material to using computer classes as a guise for luring in victims. Once that came to light, the rest of the dominoes came crashing down.
If you were going to be the first one abused on a particular day, he would pull up a chair and sit next to you. Maybe it would start with his arm around your shoulder or on your leg, and gradually move it up, touching private parts.
It features recordings made by some of his sons, giving the audience glimpses into their troubled home life. However, even more disturbing is the defense of his vile actions. Both aspects make an already off-putting documentary all the more disturbing, creating a watch that is difficult for many viewers to get through.
The types of behaviors which were described, which were, well, just downright satanic in nature. I mean, they make him sound like some kind of brutal sadist, whereas, I had just always thought of him as being kind of a nebbish.
Number 15. This is the Zodiac speaking. Much has been written about the Zodiac killings.
Get on your stomach so I can tie your feet. Okay. It gets really cold out here at night. We could freeze.
At this point, the case is among the most discussed serial tragedies in American history. This is the Zodiac Speaking is one of the most definitive documentaries about the case. It contains interviews with retired police officers and criminal profilers. Their first-hand accounts of the case give viewers unfettered access into the distressing story that has captivated Americans and true crime enthusiasts for decades. The disturbing story covers how Zodiac targeted innocent people and flippantly discussed his crimes. All the interviews in the documentary play on his notoriety. Seeing the impact the case has had on people's psyches is arguably even scarier than the story itself.
Well, I would say the paranoid inertia lasted a good 6 to 7 months. People were very concerned, and it escalated every time after another reported killing.
Number 14, The Killing of America. Released in 1982, The Killing of America argues that the United States is in the midst of a messy cultural collapse. The title has both metaphorical and literal layers to it. Much of the film is centered around the incredible wave of violence that struck America in the 60s and 70s.
A few weeks after the assassination of President Kennedy, the murder rate exploded upward, tripled in just 10 years, and continues to the present day.
This includes the assassination of John and Robert Kennedy, the rise of serial killers, and a very distressing shooting. It's a shocking documentary that leaves viewers feeling extremely uncomfortable, featuring genuine footage of violence and interviews with the likes of criminals like Sirhan and Ed Kemper. The Killing of America makes for one distressing watch.
A new breed of killer appeared. They didn't want money or sex or revenge. It was a new kind of murder. The senseless killing of random strangers.
Number 13, The Cannibal That Walked Free. Having aired on the British station Channel 5, The Cannibal That Walked Free is a nightmarish glimpse into one of humanity's darkest crimes. Through the lens of Japanese criminal Issei Sagawa, it explores the psychology behind cannibalism.
26 years ago, this man murdered and ate a woman in Paris. He has never stood trial. Today, he walks the Tokyo streets a free man.
In June of 1981, Sagawa killed and desecrated a student named René Hartefelt. But he was allowed to walk free thanks to a legal snafu between France and Japan. This documentary delves into Sagawa's crimes and the psychology behind his actions through interviews with Sagawa himself. Seeing this perturbing story get conveyed through the lens of the perpetrator can be skin-crawling. For many, it may prove too much to bear.
You see the beautiful girls on the train in the summer, and you see their legs, don't you? I think they look delicious. That much is true.
Number 12, Wisconsin Death Trip. Based on a nonfiction book of the same name, Wisconsin Death Trip is a sinister docudrama about a turbulent time in Wisconsin history. The story follows a series of disturbing occurrences that plagued the state in the late 19th century.
The grave of Mrs. Sarah Smith was unearthed for the purpose of removing the remains, and upon opening the coffin, it was discovered that she'd been buried while in a trance.
This includes the abandoning of children, homicides, arson, and supernatural delusion. As if the subject matter wasn't troubling enough, the docudrama is also shot in silent black and white to convey the style of old movies. The aged cinematography immediately puts viewers on edge. Meanwhile, the contemporary newspaper accounts are chillingly narrated by Ian Holm. The combined effect is one of deep and uncomfortable surrealism.
We can say, honestly, that we know of few states or cities which offer the advantages of those enjoyed by Wisconsin and Black River Falls.
Number 11, Eileen Waros, The Selling of a Serial Killer. Eileen Waros was a sex worker who killed 7 clients between 1989 and 1990. 2 years later, Nick Broomfield made a documentary. Most of the film is centered around Broomfield's attempts at conducting an interview with Waros in prison.
I was doing fine till Tyra told me start going to see strangers and make more money. That's how I wound up in this situation.
As she discusses the case, viewers witness the troubling defense that she put forth and the implications that it represented. The interviews with Waros are also bone-chilling. It's clear that her life was full of extensive pain and suffering at every stage. Years later, the documentary became an enormous inspiration for Charlize Theron, who would later win an Oscar for playing Waros in Monster.
Yeah, I don't need a ride. Because I want to take your car.
Number 10, The Imposter.
It gives you nightmares. It really does.
In 1994, 13-year-old Nicholas Barkley disappeared in Texas. 3 years later, a man claiming to be Nicholas came forward. But this man wasn't Nicholas at all. He was Frederic Bourdin, a French con artist. The Imposter explains how Bourdin was able to get away with it for so long, despite being significantly older than Nicholas and not looking anything like him. It's incredibly disturbing how Bourdin inserted himself into the Barkley family and tricked them into accepting him. Most remarkable of all, however, is that director Bart Layton conducted interviews with Bourdin himself, which makes the case even more complex as he somehow manages to come across as sympathetic.
From as long as I remember, I wanted to be someone else.
Number 9, Cropsey.
Growing up on Staten Island, Barbara and I had often heard the legend of Cropsey. For the kids in our neighborhood, Cropsey was the escaped mental patient who lived in the tunnels beneath the old abandoned Willowbrook Mental Institution.
A pair of filmmakers who grew up on Staten Island decided to take a closer look at the New York version of the boogeyman, Cropsey, and how or if this urban legend fits into the mysteries involving a series of kidnapped children in the 70s and 80s.
When your child disappears and you don't know where that child is, to a parent, the child is never dead.
From the letters prime suspect Andre Rand sends the documentarians claiming his innocence, to investigating the tunnels underneath the condemned Willowbrook State School for people with neurodevelopmental disabilities, and finally theories about devil worshippers, Cropsey is sure to send a chill down your spine.
Is there satanic cults, people that practice? Of course there is. But it's something that's kept very quiet, something that not many departments investigate.
Number 8, The Bridge.
So then I cut over just to see or maybe possibly help.
The Golden Gate Bridge may be one of America's most iconic landmarks and the image that comes to mind when you think of the city of San Francisco. But for many, its looming presence is a symbol of tragedy. This documentary takes a closer look at some of these tragic incidents in 2004, but it certainly isn't easy viewing. It remains controversial, with reports of bridge jumpers increasing after the documentary was released. And in 2015, it was even removed from Netflix in New Zealand.
Gene had people in this world that loved him. And he hurt them. If I see him again, that's what I want to tell him. He hurt me. And I didn't think he would ever do that.
Number 7, Holy Hell.
I thought I was capturing life and expressing love.
While searching for a new home and a new purpose in the 1980s, film grad Will Allen fell in with the Buddha-Field New Religious Movement, a cult based in West Hollywood at the time.
It was all designed to show how devoted you really were.
He wanted to control the social lives, the interactions of everybody, what they did.
Allen became the group's documentarian and lived with them for 22 years, finally leaving in 2007. He became inspired to make a movie and used all the footage he had of his time with the Buddha-Field cult and its leader, Michelle, to create Holy Hell. This direct look at the inner workings of a cult is both rare and creepy, made all the more unsettling by the fact that the cult continues to this day, now based in Hawaii.
Even to this day, I don't understand. But some people still stayed.
Number 6, The Family I Had. Originally intended to examine juvenile criminals in the U.S., this documentary quickly shifted to focus on the personal tragedy faced by Charity Lee in February 2007 involving her young daughter.
She was in a body bag.
It follows Charity as she grapples with the reality of her son having killed her daughter, as she mourns Ella's loss but refuses to abandon Paris, still visiting him in prison. It's difficult to know what to make of this uncomfortable watch, as the film leans into the fact that with true crime, there are no easy answers.
I try to keep everything as benign as possible. I don't want to do anything that's going to make Paris want to hurt him.
Number 5. Titicut Follies. One of the most disturbing films ever made, Titicut Follies was banned for over 20 years upon release. Shot in black and white with no narration, it's a raw expose of the injustices that Americans with mental health issues faced in the 1960s. Specifically centered on the Bridgewater State Hospital in Massachusetts, the film shows the gross mistreatment of the inmates, all people in need of real care who were dehumanized and abused by those tasked with looking after them.
If I see enough improvement in you.
But how can I improve if I'm getting worse? I'm trying to tell you, day by day, I am getting worse. Because of the circumstances, because of the situation.
Despite being banned, the film was able to draw attention to these issues, though it still took decades for this to begin.
Whatever sins you have committed, by the use of your sense of touch, amen.
Number 4. Jesus Camp.
Listen. We hold the keys. We can change the world.
This look at a summer camp for one branch of evangelical Christians has been disturbing viewers around the world since its initial release. Seen by many as a damning portrayal of allegedly abusive practices at camps like the featured Kids on Fire School of Ministry, it played a role in getting the camp shut down.
Father, we just wash them with the water of your word. We say no more, devil, no more.
The camp pastor, Becky Fisher, was forced to close the retreat due to backlash. But it's arguably a credit to the directors that you can't necessarily tell where their own sympathies lie while watching this movie. It's down to the viewer to decide what's right and what's wrong.
You could call it brainwashing, but I am radical and passionate in teaching children about their responsibility.
Number 3. Dear Zachary. A letter to a son about his father.
He called back to the Sunnyvale police station, so he gave me another number, and then I got through to Sergeant Krulak, and he said, "Your son is dead under suspicious circumstances. Have you got any idea why he was in the park?"
A harrowing watch, Dear Zachary follows Kurt Kenny as he makes a movie about Andrew Bagby, his lifelong friend who was allegedly murdered by his ex, Shirley Jane Turner. Turner revealed shortly after Andrew's death that she was pregnant with their child, but police had a difficult time pinning the murder on her.
I have to tell you that Andrew is dead.
Are you sure?
Yes, ma'am, I am. I'm absolutely sure.
The movie is intended as an archive of Andrew, a widely loved person by all accounts for his son Zachary. But the project became more complex the longer it went on, and by the time it was finished, it had become a fully fledged documentary. An examination of loss and grief. Dear Zachary is as poignant as it is upsetting.
This film was no longer a letter to you. It was now a letter to someone else.
Number 2. The Act of Killing.
Yang mati yang tidak wajar. Datang sini sehat. Sampai di sini dipukul. Mati.
With subject matter this heavy, The Act of Killing was always going to be a tough watch. In Indonesia, filmmaker Joshua Oppenheimer interviews former executioners who took part in the Indonesian mass killings of 1965 to 66. They reenact the killings in a variety of genres, including westerns and musicals, while Oppenheimer asks them both about their artistic choices in the portrayals and about the events themselves. The fun reenactments juxtaposed with the horrific topics they portray is extremely disturbing. It's not hard to see why this documentary remains so controversial.
Apakah ini kembali dia kepada saya?
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. Abducted in Plain Sight.
She looked up at me, her eyes beaming, and I knew that I had found the little girl that I was searching for.
Jan Broberg's story is particularly disturbing. When she was just an adolescent in the 1970s, one of the Broberg family's neighbors, Robert Berchtold, befriended Jan's parents and inserted himself into their lives. Twice Berchtold abducted Jan, including taking her to Mexico. His manipulation knew no bounds. Even after Jan was brought home the first time, her parents still allowed Berchtold to be around her, even letting him sleep in her bed.
I don't think I can ever really forgive myself for letting that happen.
By far the strangest detail is the recordings Berchtold made of aliens to further increase his influence on Jan. Thankfully, Jan and her family survived the long ordeal.
And I immediately thought I'd been kidnapped by a UFO.
Which documentary unsettles you the most? Let us know in the comments below.